What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get all into the topic for today, I would love it if you did a few things. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, the share button, and the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And then when you are finished watching this video, I would love it if you left me a comment below. That way I can get back to whatever it is that you had to say about this topic. For today's topic, I want to talk about a topic that I asked y'all to vote on, I think a week or a week and a half or so back. And this topic is about the black martyr trope. So this essentially is when you see a black man who is killed off. You know, the black guy dies in this movie type of trope. So let's get into it. As I stated in the intro, this is essentially the black guy always dies trope. But it's a lot more complicated than what a lot of you all think it is. Because when most people associate this whole idea of the black man dying in a movie or in a TV show or whatever the case may be, they typically think about horror. Because there were often times where they portrayed horror flicks and there would be a black person who would be amongst a lot of other white people or non-black people who are also non-white, like, you know, Hispanics and Indians and things like that. And they would be the person who was killed off. It was always a common thing for the black person to have to die, but there was never really an explanation as to why this was being done or the significance or anything like that. But what I'm here to tell you is that the black martyr trope actually extends past that. I'll start with this idea of the black man dying in horror flicks. Essentially, they portrayed this because they wanted to show this idea that the black man wasn't very significant or powerful. And as a result, he was a casualty who had to be killed off in order for the story to be furthered. But at the same time, what the dominant society wanted to do was make it so that they were portraying black representation so that they can get their audience off of their backs. Because as people's eyes started opening, especially our people, there was this desire to see black representation and black people on screen and whatnot. And they also showed that their sales a lot of times were better when they would portray black faces. Like I said before, just like sex sells, so does melanation. So anytime if they put a black face on television, it's always, to a certain extent, of course, to a certain extent, it's going to cause more people to want to tune in. And then more people are going to support the product because they believe that the individual who's portraying this has some level of desire to portray black representation. So it was a way to create happy medium pacification. I'll portray black people enough where I can say, hey, I portrayed y'all, don't get mad, but not enough where we give you the spotlight and the shine and people in society love you and adore you and see you as some type of figure who can be honored. So that's essentially where they were going with that. The other thing that people need to realize too is that the dominant society has a very innate level of a very large level of insecurity when it comes to race and this idea of having the black man being seen as powerful. They want us to be a joke, or they want us to be associated with some type of scheme so that other people aren't looking at the things that we have done or the powerful ways we may have been portrayed in the media. So they try to associate us with this joke of, oh, every time a black guy is in a horror flick, he ends up dying off and people can keep running with the joke. But it's kind of backfiring now because now people are like, okay, it's a common trend and a common pattern for a lot of you all as producers to portray a black person in a negative light. That being that they are always the sacrificial lamb who has to be killed off in order for the story to go on, and they're being seen as insignificant. So in other words, this representation, although it's there, it's not proper representation, and people are starting to talk back about it. But there's other parts to that as well too. There's other reasons why they do this black martyr trope outside of that. So let's get into that. One thing that you have to understand is that this trope doesn't just exist in horror flicks and television shows. It's also prevalent in cartoons, especially the ones that you see in Disney. It also happens on comic movies and television shows. It also happens on dramas. I mean, I could keep going. Any genre you can think of, this trope exists. And so there's two sides to this coin that need to be explained. So on one end, when they portrayed the black martyr trope, it's to showcase this idea that this black person was a detriment to society. They were somebody who was causing hell for everyone else in some way. And as a result, they need to be killed off. This is a way for them to demonize the image, typically of a black man, because typically when you saw this image, it was a black man who was doing this. And they were doing dirt, and as a result, they were causing problems for the other characters that were on the show, or they were just the main villain. So they portray this character because they're showing that this individual is a menace to society. And it's a way to besmirch the black male image and to also show that justice is served when you get rid of a black man, because look at the problems that they cause society. So that's one way that they try to portray this trope. So the black person becomes a martyr because they're a moniker for what needs to be eliminated in order for there to be justice in society. And you see this trope often in, I'll give you an example, the show The 100. The 100 had all types of degenerate black folks. And literally every black character, every black male character in The 100 was killed off except for one. And that was this character named Miller. And I think Miller was LGBT. So I say all that basically to say every black male character that was killed off was not LGBT. Every black male character, there were a lot of black male characters in this show who did things that were villainous. Like you had a character named Pike, and he basically tried to take control over the group, and he was willing to kill some of the other humans. And he killed another character who was a black man who was on the show. So there was a black character named Lincoln, and at first he was portrayed as this savage, and then later they tried to portray him as being kind of soft. So he was one character who was killed off, but he was killed off by another black man, that being Pike. Then Pike became this tyrant who was trying to take the humans and rule a group of them so that they could basically follow his lead. And he was willing to sacrifice them if they did not listen to him and do all this other stuff. So he was villainous. Then they had this character named Thelonious Jaha, and he was played by Isaiah Washington, I believe. And he was somewhat of a puppet, and he would go around and tell people to take this thing called the key to the city of light. So this essentially was this device that people would put in their mouths, and they would be put into this virtual reality world that was separate from the real life world that they were in. But it would turn them into somewhat of these zombies who were obsessed with having everybody return to this or live in the city of light. So what essentially happened was when people would take the key, they would become kind of brainless. They would in their real life, and they would say, you know, the city of light is great. The city of light is this magical place. I mean, like it just rains gumdrops and magic and rainbows and all types of shit. Like it was like they would act like it was the best shit smoking. And then they would try to convince other people to join the city of light as well too. And if they did it, they would get very angry. They would get very forceful, and then they would chase the people down who would deny wanting to do this. And then they would make them take the key. They would force it into their mouths. So Thelonious Jaha was essentially leading the charge into getting people to take this thing. Now, eventually his character was also killed off. There were other black characters who were killed off as well too, not just the ones I named. As a matter of fact, even Thelonious Jaha's son was killed off within the first, I believe, 3 episodes of the show. So this man was positioned, or this boy was positioned as a main character of this series, and he was killed off in the 3rd episode. So that tells you a lot about the way that they treated the black male characters. They were all sacrifices. And in some cases, they weren't even really villainous. They were just people who had to be killed off to further along the story. But in a lot of cases, they were villains who created issues for the other characters. And as a result, they needed to be gotten rid of. And they were, again, minute characters. So that tells you a lot of times how the dominant society tries to portray this image that there are still a lot of black male degenerates. Even in a post-apocalyptic world, they are the root of the issue and they need to be taken out. So that was one thing that I noticed in that show. Now, in some cases, they do the exact opposite. In other words, the dominant society, while they may want to portray to other people that the black person, the black man, is a menace to society who needs to be eliminated, they at times also portray a black man as somewhat honorable. And that's because low key, the dominant society really doesn't want to say it, but a lot of times they have a level of respect and admiration for the way that some black men carry themselves. And as a result, they portray it, but they also portray it along with portraying their insecurities. They like to portray this trope where they have painted this picture of an admirable black man, but in the process, they also show their insecurities. So for example, in some series, you may see a thing where they have this black father who is portrayed. And the black father is portrayed as somebody who is respectable, loving, caring, strong, masculine, and also is a lot of times a great father. And what they like to do is kill that character off before the show or whatever even starts. So a good example of this is in The Princess and the Frog. And another good example of this would be a show like Raising Dion. In these two particular shows and movies, because I'm saying both because Princess and the Frog was a movie and Raising Dion was a show, they portrayed this black father who was essentially the rock of their family. They were an individual who held it down, who took good care of their kid and even their spouse to a certain extent too. So they like to portray this idea of showing that the black male character could have been an integral part of the story, but they killed them off immediately and put their kids, their progeny, or their spouse in a situation where they either had to be a single parent who was fending for themselves, or they were somebody who had poor guidance. Because one thing I noticed in The Princess and the Frog is her father was a great example of a masculine black man. But when he passed away, it became this thing where Tiana was trying to be somewhat of a boss chick. They didn't really push it in your face, but what they were suggesting was that she wanted to be a boss. She wanted to have her own business. And there's nothing wrong with a black woman having her own business. As a matter of fact, I commend that. But I noticed that there were low-key hints that showed that she was supposed to be the boss so much that she was going to be the boss almost over her man. And they also did not want to put her with a black man. So what they did was they had a thing where she was chasing around Prince Naveen. And Prince Naveen was supposed to be somewhat of an honorary Pookie. So they didn't want to portray a black man with her because Disney just has this obsession with not wanting to portray a black king or prince or portray the image of a black man and a black woman being together in their cartoon flicks. They have this just innate obsession with it. But what they tried to do is take a man who was like Middle Eastern, Arabic, whatever you want to say, and he was an allegory for a Pookie, as I just said. So he's like an allegory for a lazy black man. So they didn't want to portray the black man, but they wanted to portray the lazy image of such vicariously through another character. And what they did was they put these two characters together and they made it so that she was the boss chick who wanted to work hard, had a lot of work ethic, all this other stuff, and that he was a lazy bum and he basically was spoiled and he really didn't have any work ethic at all. And it was like an opposites attract type of thing. So they wanted to portray this image, but essentially what they were doing was putting her with a black man without putting her with a black man. Because again, Prince Naveen was not black, but they were giving the images of what they would like to believe a lazy black man and also pushing her further into this boss chick feminist type of gimmick. And then they also had on Raising Dion where they had it where Michael B. Jordan's character was a great father and husband, and his wife, they had a son named Dion, and he had powers. So it made it so that when he was killed off, she was the single mother who was having a difficult time trying to raise her son on her own. So they created difficulties in a complicated black family structure because they wanted him to not be, the stronghold who tried to keep the family together. They didn't show his integral part in the story and how he helped raise Dion and built him up and all this other stuff. So it basically showed you how the black male influence could have been important in a lot of these situations. Maybe if Tiana's father was around and not killed off, maybe she would have wanted a black husband. Maybe they wouldn't have pushed her into boss chick isms. And then in the case of raising Dion, maybe if, you know, Michael B. Jordan's character was around more, maybe he would have been able to teach his son certain things and whatnot and help the family kind of stay together. Now, some of y'all will basically say, oh, well, that's to create conflict and all this other stuff. But what I'm trying to get you all to understand is that they do these things on purpose. These aren't things that are just an accident, because it's no accident that they, and many times on television, don't really show a proper black family structure. It's actually a very common thing for them to show some type of dysfunction. And even if there is a black family that is placed together, there's a thing where either they're shacking up and, you know, they're divorced, or it's a really complicated situation, or it's some baby mama isms, or the woman is like extremely masculine, the man is extremely soft. It'll be something like that. So, and those are also rare situations, by the way, too. Most of the time, they like to show a black man or woman who is by themselves or in an interracial relationship, or they're LGBT. No shade to any of those situations. I'm just simply saying that they are trying to avoid as much as they can portraying this idea of having a black man and a black woman together. Another great example of the black martyr trope is the character T'Challa, specifically from the Black Panther series in the MCU. But I'm talking directly about his portrayal, or I guess the funeral in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This also was a black martyr situation because they believed that his legacy was something that had to be killed off in order for a new legacy to be birthed. So what they were trying to do was take the black male leadership out of the Black Panther story, and they were trying to make it so that the Black Panther series was ruled by the women of Wakanda, and that the black male leadership, black fatherhood, and all these other things that once existed in the Wakandan Empire were now diminished and were now gone. And they, in my opinion, sourly used Chadwick Boseman's death as a moniker, or as an excuse in this case, to try to get rid of the Black Panther character in T'Challa. And they really did not have to. And there's not really a good explanation, in my opinion, why T'Challa should not have been able to, you know, be continued, where, you know, they had another actor play the character, or, you know, have a T'Challa from a different universe. There's no explanation why that wasn't a thing, or that has not been a thing yet. But my point here is that he became the black martyr because he was killed off for the greater good of trying to create a black woman empowerment, or a woman empowerment movement, and also a black and brown coalition, which really is a dominant society narrative. They're the ones who want to see this more than anybody else. For those of you all who are unaware, BET did a Black Panther series as well. And in this series, the T'Challa character was very assertive, unlike his MCU counterpart. In this series, he was aware of the dominant society and what they were trying to do. And he also was aware that Captain America was aligned with the dominant society, and he proceeded to tag that ass when he tried to come to Wakanda and try to take the resources that were there. But if you look in the MCU, his character was very passive. He was allowing the women of Wakanda to dictate all of his decisions and change his decisions. You know, that's why a lot of them were running around saying, T'Challa, the world is watching, or we must give our resources to the United Nations. You know, they was all on that shit. So I'm saying all that to basically say they portrayed two different versions of T'Challa, a passive one and an assertive one. And both of these characters have been killed off. In one instance, the character himself was the only thing that was killed off. In the other instance, the whole series was diminished. There was only one season, and then it ended. My point is that this closely links to history and what they've actually done with black male figures who could inspire other black men or black boys. Look at people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. These were two individuals who inspired black society. And ultimately, the dominant society had a level of admiration for them as well too. But their admiration for them was also mixed in with a level of jealousy and also fear, because they did not want these individuals to positively impact black people, to wake them up. So as a result, they got rid of both of these individuals, either by their own doing or by getting puppets to do their bidding. And again, Martin Luther King was seen, or at least portrayed by the dominant society, as a pacifist. And Malcolm X was portrayed as somebody who was uncompromising and by any means necessary. And as a result, both of them were offed by the dominant society. So what this shows you is that no matter if a black man is passive or a black man is assertive, if he has the potential to be seen as admirable in black society and other people emulate their example, then the dominant society knows that they have to be killed off. AKA, they become a black martyr who is killed off for the greater good of continuing the dominant society's agendas. All right, y'all. So that's all I had for this topic. I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come, so stay tuned. Other than that, I will be talking to y'all later. Peace.